Hi there, and welcome to Capital Alchemy, the podcast that brings you big names in finance from South Africa and beyond. Here we chat about all things money, whether it's investments, financial planning, economics, or even a bit of politics. Our mission? To make these topics fun and easy to understand through laid-back interview-style episodes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. We hope you learn something new.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Capital Alchemy. And today we are speaking to Anne Klein from LuciaDeKlein Private Office. Morning, Anne, and thank you for making the time to come and meet up with me.
Good morning, Lerato. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We appreciate your invitation and we're looking forward to this discussion.
So before we get into conversations about switching the billion-dollar conversation lines and also about family offices in general, can you just introduce yourself, your background, and how you ended up in private office?
Yes, certainly. I've actually got a long-standing career. Started off in the 1990s in the Department of Justice, of all places. So I really started at the bottom of where one can start in terms of private capital and private wealth at the Master of the High Court, which was a good training ground. But it was really back to the basics. So that's where I started. I then served my articles at one of the oldest law firms in our country, which was a very good experience. Was fortunate enough to be introduced to clients with substantial wealth and businesses and very successful families. And that's how I got introduced into, I would say, the first level of private capital. After that, I was fortunate enough to work for a global organization where we supported single-family offices, and we were part of a multi-family office operation. And my career then went to one of the accountancy firms, where I spent a very short period of my career at the accountancy firm, purely because I wanted to go back into the family office environment that I really enjoyed at that time. I then, after a couple of years, went to one of the financial institutions, spent 8 years there, heading up solutions for the private wealth clients in the fiduciary space. So I'm a lawyer by profession.
Thank you for that intro. It is a very long, stemful career. Can we just go into family offices? What are family offices? Which type of family qualifies to be part of a family office? And then we can take it further from there.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Actually, on my way to the studio, I actually thought about it, and I knew you were going to ask me this question. What I've seen over the years is, before people even knew about family offices, I was fortunate enough to be part of it. So what that assisted me with was, I had time to unpack what it actually means. And I will never forget, I made the same mistake as many people do, where I just refer to it as family offices. One of my very intelligent colleagues at the time then actually corrected me and explained to me there's a difference between a single family office and a multi-family office. And you have different types of family offices. So we can try and make it very complicated, but to keep it simple, basically any family, any family needs family governance. But some families need more than a simple family governance structure. They actually need a family office. And then you have different levels of family offices. For family enterprises, they would normally start off with an embedded family office. And all that basically means is they'll have certain functionalities within the business structure where they're actually helping the family to grow the family balance sheet. But for most single family offices, they would have had one big, maybe liquidity event where they needed a secure place only for their family story, and their family mission, vision, and value, a place where they can call home in terms of their family values.
It's very interesting that you touched on that. So to me, and I think because you had afforded me the opportunity to write that article on generational wealth, the one thing that I've always spoken about when it came to family offices, it fully understands single family offices and multi-family offices. It's also the understanding that there should be good governance, there should be shared values, and there should also be regular intakes to be held accountable and to see if the whole family and all family members are still on the same page. Can we just unpack that a bit more?
Absolutely. What I've had to learn when I'm doing a lot of research because of the book that we wrote and because of all the work that I'm doing for some of the companies that I'm involved with, is that we look at, I've got a special interest in what it means to be successful and what does it mean to be a successful family. So we all have our own understanding. A lot of us maybe measure success on material wealth, but ultimately from my experience working with families who are able to go from one generation to the next, they actually understand that each person within that family structure have different needs and different capabilities, but ultimately the family as a unit need to make sure that they take everybody forward within the family story. So, at times one could maybe argue or reflect on how the family got to where they are now, how they want to move forward, and then can one really call it a family, and how do you define a family, and who should sit at the table? And if I talk about how do you define a family, sometimes it's as basic as who is a member of that family. Is it someone who married into the family? If someone leaves the family, are they allowed to leave the family? How do they leave the family? And, being able to have a plan for the family. Doesn't matter the size of the wealth. It's having a plan and then having a roadmap to say this is the path that we'll travel, and the path needs to be flexible because a lot of things happen within families, within the world, things that we don't always have control over. But at least if we have a plan, it's much faster for us to move on our decision making.
So you're talking about structures. Is this about if we're going to now put a family structure, are we now going to put a business trust behind it because you want to now put business included? Or are we putting the right structures in place to ensure that whatever is expected of the family and each family member to be continued as it should?
Once again, thank you for that question. When you look at internationally global families, one call families that, they have different advisory boards and different structures. So within that family, you have so many different elements. But most definitely, the families who do succeed from one generation to the next have at one stage received very good advice from professionals helping them with the correct structure. Internationally, and from our conversations with our international colleagues, I learn something new every day. There are so many interesting solutions for families. It's about finding an aligned solution for that family, and the family should never feel that they're being forced into making a decision. I think the type of advisory professionals in the ultra-high net worth space, they normally reflect on things like, how long will the structure be able to last? Is it fit for purpose? Are we choosing it in the right country for the right reasons? I'm not a tax professional, but the tax planning element always comes in. It makes sense.
Jurisdiction of where everything is registered.
Yes, you need to make sure that the basics are right in terms of compliance. Now, for families who run big family enterprises who hold a lot of wealth, they don't always have the time to run around doing certain things. And that's why it's good to have trusted partners and trusted advisors who can actually be the gatekeepers. I want to share a story with you, and I've actually touched on that in another book that I wrote a chapter on. And sometimes with very successful families, they get people approaching them the whole time, whatever that the person needs. And one of the conversations I had a few years ago was a successful business person saying to me, if he can only stop that, if he can only get someone to stop the requests coming to him. So what he did is he actually appointed someone to be the gatekeeper for their family. So any request for supporting whatever cause would first go to this professional advisor who was a chartered accountant or CA. And the successful families realize that you need good financial people in your team, or wealth people with knowledge, like your type of knowledge in terms of skills, So I think they need skilled, not only skilled in terms of your background, but skilled in terms of being in alignment with what the family actually want. And
what they're trying to achieve.
Yes, and protecting that family story.
Thank you for touching on that, because now I would actually want to say, you spoke about having the right advisory team around you. In every successful ultra-high net worth family, or even just any family structure, for it to succeed, there should be the right legal person there, there should be the right accountant there, there should be the right financial advisor for the story to continue and for everything to align. I mean, even in our sector, we talk about ensuring that a family or an individual's risk appetite aligns with what we are trying to achieve. And therefore, we produce an investment that's in line with what they have in mind and what they're trying to achieve with the amount of money they're willing to invest. We've had discussions about co-investments within family offices, and we touched on how to preserve money and how to also grow money. Can we just discuss about the importance of investments along the structures or the family setups?
Absolutely. I think what is important to know is that each family is slightly different. So they have different needs. How and where they made the money, that's a different story. How the generations want to move forward, that's a different story. With the new generation coming through, they have new ideas. So I think a lot of the advisors might get left behind if they don't actually learn to appreciate the voice of the new generation, which is actually very important because they will carry the legacy forward. So traditionally, some of the, let's call them the people who created the wealth, so the wealth creators, when they start off their businesses, they might have one approach. And then as the wealth grows and, things change, they actually change the way that they look at their investments and how they want to be treated. So if your advisory board don't seem to adjust, then it actually, could be that the family might need something else. I think it's so important to have a clear communication system between, the financial or the wealth advisors and the clients. And, what I've also noticed is at times, and I think it's a natural thing that happens within the advisory boards, people tend to focus on one generation and then forgetting that actually you should start building up a portfolio for the next generation. And some of the clients, what they do is they like to empower the next generation. They would give them a starter pack, for example, and then someone like you, just as an example, could come in and assist the child, for example, with the starter pack. Now, depending on what the child does with this starter pack, that might determine how the family do the next level of planning. So a lot of what we do is step by step. It's not aggressive, let's go in, let's do that, let's move on to the next discussion. It's about building trust. It's about building conversations. And it's about making sure that whatever you do can stand the test of time. And even, if there's any sort of disruption within the family. You spoke about protection, I think, of what they built. There needs to be a level of protection and diversification. I'm not I don't have your background, but the biggest thing is diversification, and then, like I say, the
Preservation and growth, yes. Thank you so much for touching on that. Before we get into this book, Switching Billion-Dollar Conversation Lines, we're about to take a break, so click like and subscribe. We'll be back with you shortly. Thank you for getting back with us. We are still continuing conversations with Anne Klein from LuciaDeKlein Private Office. The one thing that I've realized, Anne, is that within the industry, people are now also writing a lot of books. And I fully understand that it's about knowledge sharing, passing on the skills by writing them down. But this book has always intrigued me, and every time I come across it, I'm always thinking, I need that book, I need that book. It just aligns with what families are trying to achieve, what ultra-high net worth individuals are trying to achieve. But let's get into this. How do we switch this billion-dollar conversation? How do we take that conversation and turn it into AUM?
The way we see it, so that's my co-author, myself, Brian DeLucia, is when we started talking about the book, he always had a one line, and he said we need to do what's best for the families. And the families don't just include our clients, the families include our families, your family, each family. And it doesn't matter how you define family or what your family structure looks like. Because ultimately, having been fortunate enough to work within the private capital space or the private wealth space, one can see that, there are certain elements that can take us forward and certain elements that could work against us. And what we've established was that sometimes, people don't have the right access to knowledge or the right skills, and the advisors and the families are actually sitting at the same table, but they're not really having the same discussion. So you might think one thing and the family actually needs something else. So the book was written in such a way to try and make sure we can switch sides, because what I've also noticed, and Brian we've spoken about it extensively, is at time let's just say your client with the lowest asset value might become one of your biggest clients in 20 years, purely because they were introduced to the right advisors. And, saying the right advisor, you always need a good person to give investment advice. There are certain basic advisory needs for families, regardless of where you are. Small switches.
I'm glad you're touching on conversation lines, ensuring that both the advisor and the family are not talking past each other, but are actually talking towards the same dream or trying to achieve the same thing. I see that this book also has practical things to do inside it. I see that there's things that you need to complete. Can you just divulge further about that?
Absolutely. So the way we've written it was to use it as a book for you to write your own family story. So it doesn't matter if you have $1 billion or you don't. What we want you to do is to participate in the story, and then, rewrite your family story, because with the families that we work with, we see that there's always, I want to say one, but, normally two, people who say we are going to change the story, and we will not allow for whatever story we had before we came here to proceed. We will change it. And of course, one acknowledges the stories before our arrival, but someone now needs to say, we in a position now to change. If you're an advisor or wherever you fit into the family wealth space, it doesn't really matter. As long as you also have a vision for your family, then I think the practical side of it is, because you now need to write something down. You need to decide what are your shared values as a family. Speak to your children or your parents about your shared values, because ultimately it's not the numbers that will drive the family forward.
It's the values.
It's the values, yes.
You know, the interesting thing is that along with this book and along with keeping the conversation steady on both sides, LuciaDeKlein also has a subscription page. And going through it, I've also noticed that it's for families, it's also for family offices, and it's also for private professionals. Are you trying to create a conversation amongst all parties? Is this what this subscription page is all about?
Absolutely. So it's all about empowering everyone within the platform. It's about sharing knowledge and ideas. There's a lot of knowledge available to us freely these days, but ultimately it's about, being selective in terms of the knowledge, that you should consume. I'm a firm believer that we can read a lot, but sometimes we need one place where we can go to and say, when I go to this place, I'm going to learn more about generational wealth. And I touch, I've got a founder's block as well, so I touch a lot on things that I feel, messages that I think will be important for the next generation moving forward, and even for the current generation. And just from my experience alone, I've noticed and worked with a lot of families where the females are driving the stories, or the females are driving the family offices in terms of management and the roles that they play, and there's a huge transfer of wealth. So it's just empowering everybody. If they really want to have knowledge, they need to be able to go on a subscription page, listen to an interview with a family office specialist in another country, because the similar principles apply.
I'm glad you're touching on that. You have said previously that you see that family offices that you chose female, and they are going towards philanthropy. So to them, it's all about giving back.
Absolutely, we are all similar, but in a way we all do things differently. But what binds humanity is our ability to care. And what I've seen from working with some of the female, let's just call them specialists for now, or whoever will take the lead in those family offices, they care deeply. And I don't say anybody else doesn't care, but they care deeply in the sense that they actually want to leave a legacy for the next generation. You'll see some very, you'll read in the newspapers, there are women who just give a lot of money away towards causes that they want to support. So I think it's just within our nature to do that. And having done all my research and having read a lot of articles, what I've also noticed is, unfortunately, sometimes we give, but we give in an unstructured manner, which doesn't give us the ultimate impact that we actually want to achieve. So once again, it's extremely important. If a professional person does a job for you and they charge a fee, it's important to acknowledge that you need those skills, because they'll give you the right structure to host your philanthropy story, or whatever you want to achieve in terms of your philanthropic goals, and to make sure that your story can move forward. I've seen, or read about families where they've just given in a way that wasn't structured and actually could deplete the wealth. You try to get something good, but your impact is maybe not what it should be. So always just consult and specialists in those areas. You actually have very good people who can support the family story. Before I forget, also with the younger generation coming in, it's fantastic to think you can actually start including them in those advisory boards to train them up to when they sit on some of the other family boards.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come and have a chat with us. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, press subscribe to make sure you don't miss another minute of Capital Alchemy. See you next time.